January 19th, 2018. I'm Joseph Farley. Welcome to the show. There's a lot of news ahead, so let's get started. Yesterday, CNBC, in an article published January 18th, and the headline reads, "The Dow's 31% gain during Trump's first year is the best since." You ready for this? They could not let it go without putting this in here. So, there's a reason why they put this in here. Since FDR. And so they have some bullet points behind this, so let's look at some of these bullet points. The 30 stock index has surged more than 31% since Trump's inauguration. That marks the index best performance during the first year of a president since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You've got lower taxes, less regulation, and confidence in the economy is high, said one investor. The S&P 500 has surged 23% during Trump's first year in office. Now, here's the most important thing about this. They have a graph up here that shows Franklin D. Roosevelt at 96.5%, with the caption above it that says the Dow's performance during the first year in office for these presidents. And you have Donald Trump at 31.3%, Harry S. Truman, 30.9%, Barack Obama, 28%, Lyndon B. Johnson, 21%, George H.W. Bush, 19.6%, Bill Clinton, 19.5%, John F. Kennedy, 10.8%, Gerald Ford, 4.2%, and it goes on from there. After that, then it begins to fall off into the negatives. But the point that I wanted to cover in this article, like most fake news that CNBC produces on financial markets, what I want to point out is that Franklin D. Roosevelt got into office after a Great Depression, and it always happens this way. They create a crisis and then come in to save the day. And of course, the American people had no clue at that time what was going on. They didn't have what we have today as far as instant information, the ability to go back and research the record that a lot of the globalists have been trying to rewrite history, so you can't find this. And so it's very difficult to go back and really know what the truth is unless you get into congressional records to find out exactly what happened. So let's look at this Franklin Delano Roosevelt guy. When did the Great Depression start? Now, according to an article in The Balance publication, the Great Depression started in 1929, and on March 25th, the stock market had corrected. Many investors were wiped out since they had invested money that they borrowed from their brokers. When the market fell, the brokers called in their loans. That wiped out some businesses, including banks. There were no laws that prevented banks from investing customers' deposits. Families lost their entire life savings. 4 days later, Federal Reserve Board member Charles Mitchell provided $25 million from his National City Bank to arrest the slide. What they should have done is arrest the bankers, getting away from the article for a second, because the bankers are the ones that caused the depression. Let's go back to the article. By August of that year, the economy started to contract. Retail sales had dropped despite high levels of consumer debt. Getting away from this article for just a moment, the newspapers, that would be the fake media, the propaganda media, had begun to pump and pump and pump and pump and pump constantly that we're in a depression, we're in a depression. That got into the minds, into the psyche of the people, and it caused them to start speaking it, claiming it, talking about the depression, how bad it is, people losing their jobs, the whole thing, and the American public bought the big lie. And I'm sure they had this constantly front headlines. Car sales fell, driving down manufacturers. The Federal Reserve should have lowered rates to fight the recession. Instead, it raised the discount rate from 5% to 6% to prevent inflation. No, what they did is they continued in the depression, and they drove the price down to nothing, and that's where they come in and begin to buy everything up. The normal, everyday people are out of cash. They're out of money. They have no way of being able to hold on to what they bought. Okay, back to the article. Instead, it raised the discount rate from 5% to 6% to prevent inflation. It also wanted to defend the gold standard. At that time, the value of the dollar was supported by the gold price. Now, this is important. The U.S. government promised to redeem any dollar for its value in gold. All right, let's move on. So what the newspapers have continued to do ever since this drop and ever since the Depression is called autosuggestion. And what they're doing is that they're suggesting something to you over and over and over and over and over and over. Even if it's a lie, your subconscious mind will pick it up and believe that it's actually the truth. And that's what they did when they crashed this thing in 1929. FDR comes on the scene in 1933. Let's look at some highlights of FDR real quick. According to Wikipedia, in 1932, Roosevelt defeated Republican President Herbert Hoover in a landslide. Roosevelt took office while the United States was in the midst of the worst economic crisis in history. So coming from 100 to 200 on the stock market, you've had a 100% rise in the market. In other words, you cannot compare Trump against FDR. Completely different dynamics. And that's how CNBC has tried to spin the story. During the first 100 days of the 73rd United States Congress, Roosevelt spearheaded unprecedented federal regulation and issued a profusion of executive order that instituted the New Deal. That New Deal, guys, that New Deal is the problem that we're fighting today with all these agencies, departments, bureaus. That New Deal has been the downfall to America ever since it was enacted. That New Deal set up fiefdoms. Yes, I said fiefdoms in these different agencies. And I'll explain that a little bit more later. A variety of programs designed to produce relief, recovery, and reform. He created numerous programs to provide relief to the unemployed, the farmers, while seeking economic recovery with the National Recovery Administration and other programs. They set up all of these programs because everybody was out of work, because they killed the economy, and then they auto-suggested the people for the next several years. Woe is me, and here we go. He also instituted major regulatory reforms related to finance, communication, labor, and presided over the end of prohibition. The economy improved rapidly from 1933 to 1937. Well, I would think so. I mean, they took the boot off the Americans' neck, and Roosevelt won in a landslide for re-election in 1936. Roosevelt controlled the media. It was a design takeover. This designed takeover in 1933 are going to be the issues that we're going to cover throughout this broadcast. Back to the text. But the economy relapsed into a deep recession in 1937-1938. After the 1936 election, Roosevelt galvanized opposition by seeing the passage of the Judiciary Reorganization Bill of 1937, which would have expanded the size of the Supreme Court of the United States. The bipartisan conservative coalition that formed in 1937 prevented the passage of that bill and blocked the implementation of further New Deal programs and reforms. Major surviving programs and legislation impacted under Roosevelt included the Security and Exchange Commission, the National Labor Relations Act, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and Social Security. Ladies and gentlemen, very important to understand where money comes from and how they get it. So here's something that a lot of people don't understand about the Social Security Act, and that is this. When they passed that, they paid the states to be informants on the people that were born. That's where this birth certificate came in. And if you have a birth certificate, then the states receive remuneration. In other words, the states get money for that birth certificate. That money goes into an agency, a bureau, or a department. Now, they've set this up to where the informant, go back and pull your birth certificates out and look at this. And if you were born in the 50s, you'll see this, that it asks for the informant. Now, that's a very important word. Who is usually an informant? Well, it would be someone that witnesses a crime. What crime was there? Could it possibly be that the Luciferians had set this up to where when a child is delivered in a hospital, that child gets fingerprinted footprinted, and arrested at birth. That gets into a much deeper subject, that name, that all capitalized letter name, is registered in Washington, D.C., in the District of Criminals, or Columbia, if you'd prefer it that way. That's why that name is all capitalized when there is a lawsuit that is brought. You don't think a keyboard can have upper and lowercase letters? And why is it all uppercased? Well, the reason that it's all uppercased is because of the trick that the Luciferians have perpetrated on the American people. And that trick is this: they're going to accuse your strongman, your all capitalized letter name, of a crime. Now, don't they have to follow the Constitution? No, they don't, because they've made that all capitalized letter name into a fictitious corporation in Washington, D.C. Of course, you, the human body, not knowing how the trick actually works, you're the one that has to suffer the brunt of their violation of the Constitution. So, we'll get into that at a little later date as well. But it's important to understand where this money comes from. And the way that they get this money is off your signature. So when you sign a loan document or anything else, they're not handed you money right there. That's not how that works. What happens is that they take your signature and hypothecate it against money that has been established in the corporate fraudulent corporate fiction account that's in Washington, D.C. So the Secretary of the Treasury goes over to the Federal Reserve, borrows what we think is money, but it's merely a credit line, borrows this credit line to come back and put into the banking system. Once it gets into the banking system, now, what backs up that credit line? Could it be a country that's $21 trillion in debt? No. Could it be a country that has $21 trillion missing? No. No one would loan a country like that any money. Could it be a country that has a great GDP? Well, no, don't think that's it. But wait a minute. Could it be a country that has victimized their, and I use air quotes here, citizens, and has created an algorithm where they've been able to trade the futures of the fee, fines, and fornication that's done to the American people? Does that have value? Absolutely, that has value. Because with the propaganda war machine that they've placed on the American people, they've sent the American people out as wind-up crash dummies to show up for work and work 60, 70, 80 hours a day for fiat currency that has absolutely no value whatsoever. And this is why the cryptocurrency is so important. The term cryptocurrency, well, a digital currency is not money either. Money is gold. And according to a testimony of J.P. Morgan over 100 years ago in a lawsuit, he said this: gold is money. Everything else is credit. This saying, attributed to the original J.P. Morgan in response to a question, what is money? Is still as true today as it was over 100 years ago. Morgan, in 1912, once acquired gold or silver in a bimetal system, becomes the only asset that has monetary value at all times and in all circumstances. Also, unlike anything else, on most financial statements, gold or silver as an asset does not have to be the liability of anyone else. So in other words, if you own gold, that's money. That's real assets. Something else that's kind of interesting that should be explored, and that is the financial statements that people certify that these are my assets, when in fact they're not their assets. Did you know that the money that you work for, that they actually print out and give to you, the cash that you have isn't yours. Matter of fact, you're not even supposed to have it. Don't believe me? How about I show you? Before I show you, I need to make sure that I have the correct disclaimer so I don't violate any rules, laws, codes, ordinances, or anything else in this state, whatever that state would be and wherever that term would actually be. So let me read to you 12 U.S.C., that is United States Code 411, issuance to reserve banks, nature of obligation, redemption. Federal Reserve notes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what you have is either a credit line in your account, or when you go to be what you think is paid, they give you Federal Reserve notes. It's not money. It's a note. It's a promise to pay. And we'll get into that as well. Federal Reserve notes to be issued at the discretion of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System for the purpose of making advances to the Federal Reserve Bank through the Federal Reserve agents as hereinafter set forth, and for no other purposes are authorized. The said notes shall be the obligation of the United States. Okay, so let me ask you this. Let me stop in mid-sentence. I'll go back and pick it up. But let me ask you this. How can you pay a tax on someone else's obligation? Just think about that. Now, I'm not auto-suggesting that you not pay your tax. That's not what I'm saying. I'm asking you to think about this for just a moment. Here's the obligation of somebody else. Let me give you a scenario. Bill, my neighbor, comes in and says, "Hey, Joseph, how about you pay my tax?" Well, Bill, why would I want to pay your tax? That's your obligation. It's not my obligation. You pay the tax. Just a thought. Let me go back and read that sentence where I stopped. The said notes shall be the obligation of the United States and shall be receivable by all national and member banks and Federal Reserve banks, and for all taxes, customs, and other public dues. They shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand at the Treasury of the United States, in the city of Washington, District of Columbia, or at any Federal Reserve bank. So I tell you what you do. Take your Federal Reserve notes, run down there to the Federal Reserve banks. There's 12 of them in the country, by the way, and ask to be paid for your note. Now, word of wisdom, take your crash dummy uniform there, because they will throw you to the curb. They're not going to pay you, folks. They haven't paid you. They've never paid you. They've stole your labor. They've stole everything from you. But here's the big kick, and I mean, don't feel so bad. Now, wait a minute. There's possibly better news here. Well, actually, not really, but maybe it'll make you feel better. This is the 1933 bankruptcy. See, they didn't cover that in FDR's bio there on Wikipedia. Yeah, that's not covered. But here's what is covered, and that is the public laws of the 73rd Congress, United States of America, passed at the first session, which was begun and held at the city of Washington in the District of Columbia on Thursday, the 9th day of March, 1933, and was adjourned without day on Friday, the 16th day of June, 1933. An act to provide relief in the existing national emergency in banking and for other purposes. But see, they haven't told you what those other purposes are. Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that the Congress hereby declares that a serious emergency exists, and that it is imperatively necessary speedily to put in effect remedies of uniform national application. Title I, Section 1. The acts, regulations, rules, licenses, that's very important, That word licenses are very, very important. Orders and proclamations heretofore or hereafter taken, promulgated, made, or issued by the President of the United States or the Secretary of the Treasury since March 4th, 1933, pursuant to the authority conferred by subsection B, wait till you hear this, of Section 5 of the Act October 6, 1917, as amended, are hereby approved and confirmed. Now, the October 6, 1917 Act is very important for you to go back and read. It's also very important for you to read the, I believe it's 7 pages, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of this particular act, and you can find that at 48 Stat 1. There's a PDF that you could download to read this this particular act. It's very, very important what they've done here, and I'm getting ready to get to a point that you may not believe. Matter of fact, I didn't believe it. I had to go back and research this. When I first heard this, I thought that cannot be true. Absolutely cannot be true. Let me continue where I left off here. B of Section 5 of the Act of October 6, 1917, as amended, are hereby approved and confirmed. Now, what is the Act of October 6, 1917? Let's see, what in the world could that be? That is the Trading with the Enemy Act, Volume 40, page 415, 966, amended. Foreign exchange, export of hoarding of coin, bullion, etc. Regulatory power of presidents during, you ready for this? Hold it. You ready? Here he goes. National emergency. Oh my gosh. Folks, we got a national emergency. Man the hatches. Man the hatches. Draw the bridges. We have a national. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a national emergency since 1933. Every president, all the way through, has declared a national emergency. Mistake? I think not. Here we go. Section 2, Subdivision B of Section 5 of the Act of October 6, 1917, 40 Stat at large, 411. As amended, is hereby amended to read as follows. B, during time of war. Have we ever been out of the war? We've had the war on poverty. See how well that worked. The war on drugs. Hey, just say no. Let's see. What other wars have we? We've had a lot of wars, and every president has declared them. We've had 9/11. And if you don't think 9/11 is a false flag, you're brain dead. You've got to be brain dead. The media totally and completely lied to you about that. They started talking about Building 7 going down, and in their background, it hadn't even fallen yet. Yeah, they imploded it, along with the other buildings. And it's all for a reason that you'll see. 40 Stat at large, 411, as amended, is hereby amended to read as follows. B, during the time of war or during any other period of national emergency declared by the president may, through any agency that he may designate or otherwise investigate, regulate, or prohibit, under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe, by means of license or otherwise, any transaction in foreign exchange, transfer of credit between, or payments by banking institutions as defined by the president, and export, hoarding, melting, or earmarking of gold or silver, coin, or bullion, or currency by any, major word here, person within the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And the president may require any, here comes that word again, person, engaged in any transaction referred to in the subsection to furnish under oath complete information regarding thereto, including the production of any books of accounts, contracts, letters, other papers in connection herewith in the custody or control of such persons, either before or after such transaction is completed. Here we go. Whoever willfully violates any of the provisions of this subdivision or any license, order, rule, or regulation issued thereunder shall upon conviction be fined not more than $10,000. Or if a natural person, now where in the world did the natural person come in? May be imprisoned not more than 10 years, or both. And any officer, director, or agent of any corporation who knowingly participates in such violation may be punished by the like fine, imprisonment, or both. As used in this subdivision, the term person means an individual, partnership, association, or corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, they have once again tricked you. Now, who tricked you? Was it the politician? Yeah. How about the attorneys? Yeah. The news media? Yeah. School teachers? Yep. Preachers? Yep. Everyone you counted on for the truth has pretty much fooled you. Now, a lot of people will fight. I mean, they will throw down and fight for their beliefs, even if they're wrong. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you where money comes from. We're going to show you what money is and what you think money is. And more importantly, we're going to get to the truth about where money, or the concept of money, where it's really pushed. So here we have 4 words that I'd really like to focus on that are not defined in the act. And you assume that you are a person. So I'm not going to fight you on that. I'm going to leave it up to you. You find out. Are you a person or are you a people? Which one are you? Do you know? Do you know there's a difference between a person and a people? So let me read this. And it's very important to understand that statutory construction is quite simply this. You have to have the same kind of things in a sentence or it violates statutory construction. So let's say you have an apple, you have an orange, and you have a banana, and then you have a dump truck. Well, common sense would tell you that those 4 things aren't related. An apple, an orange, and a dump truck, an apple, orange, and banana, and a dump truck aren't the same. So you have to put the same things together. So you could have a dump truck, a tractor trailer, a snowplow truck. All 3 of those are the same. So in statutory construction, everything must be the same. So let's read this again for their little definition. As used in this subsection, the term person, corporate fiction, means individual, corporate fiction, partnership, corporate fiction, association, corporate fiction, or corporation, another corporate fiction. All of those things are corporate fictions. Those are all things made up by the federal government or the states, not people. Section 11 of the Federal Reserve Act is amended by adding, at the end thereof, the following new subsections. Whenever in the judgment of the Secretary of the Treasury, such action is necessary to protect the currency system of the United States, the Secretary of the Treasury, in his discretion, may require any and all individuals, partnerships, associations, and corporations to pay and deliver to the Treasury of the United States any and all gold coin, gold bullion, gold certificates owned by such individuals, partnerships, associations, and corporations. Upon receipt of such gold coins, gold bullions, and gold certificates, the Secretary of the Treasury shall pay therefore an equivalent amount of any other form of coin or currency, coined, or issued under the laws of the United States. The Secretary of the Treasury shall pay all cost of the transportation of such gold bullions, gold certificates, coins, or currency, including the cost of insurance, protection, and such other incidental cost as may be reasonably necessary. Any individual, partnership, association, or corporation failing to comply with any requirements of the Secretary of the Treasury made under this subsection shall be subject to penalties equal to twice the value of gold or gold certificates, in respect of which such failure occur, and such penalties may be collected by the Secretary of the Treasury, by suit or otherwise. Section 4. In order to provide for the safety and more effective operation of the national banking system and the Federal Reserve System, to preserve for the people the full benefit of the currency provided for by the Congress through the national banking system and the Federal Reserve System, and to relieve interstate commerce on the burdens and obstructions resulting from the receipts on an unsound or unsafe base of deposit, subject to withdrawal by check during such emergency period as the President of the United States by proclamation may prescribe. No member bank of the Federal Reserve System shall transact any banking business except to such extent and subject to such regulation, limitation, and restrictions as may be prescribed by the Secretary of the Treasury with the approval of the President. Any individual, partnership, corporation, or association, or any director, officer, or employee thereof, violating any of the provisions of this section shall be deemed guilty of misdemeanor, and upon felony conviction thereof shall be fined not more than $10,000. Or, if a natural person may, in addition to such fine, be in prison for a term not exceeding 10 years. You see, it's hard to throw a corporation in prison, but a natural person? Well, you'll see the trick coming up. Each day that any such violation continues shall be deemed a separate offense. Section 201, Title 2. This title may be cited as the Bank Conservation Act. Section 202. As used in this title, the term bank means 1. Any national banking association, and 2. Any bank or trust company located in the District of Columbia and operating under the supervision of the Comptroller of Currency. And the term state means any state. Oh, you know, in school I didn't get to do that. What's the definition of a bicycle? It's a bicycle. Yeah, usually I got sent to the end of the room for something like that. Or can you use bicycle in a sentence? Yes, you've asked me to use bicycle in a sentence. Yeah. But these guys, this would be the smart, intelligent leaders of our country, Congress, they get to do this. So state means any state, territory, or possession of the United States and the Canal Zone. Now, there is a treasure trove of great information just in that statement. However, the term United States does not mean what you think it means, and we don't have time to get into the definition of the United States. Section 203, whenever he shall deem it necessary in order to conserve the assets of any bank for the benefit of any depositor and other creditor thereof. Now, back in 1933, who would be the creditor? Could that be the Federal Reserve? Let's keep reading. The Comptroller of the Currency may appoint a conservator for such bank and require of him such bond and security as the Comptroller of the Currency deems proper. The conservator, under the direction of the Comptroller, shall take possession of the books, records, and assets of every description of such bank, and take such action as may be necessary to conserve the assets of the such bank pending further deposition of its business as provided by law. Such conservator shall have all rights, powers, and privileges now possessed by or hereafter given receiver of insolvent national banks, and shall be subject to the obligations and penalties not inconsistent with the provisions of this title, to which receivers are now or may hereafter become subject. During the time of such conservator remains in possession of such banks, the rights of all parties with respect thereto shall, subject to the other provisions of this title, be the same as if the receiver had been appointed thereof. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a bankruptcy in America in 1933, and they ran big ads that basically said, turn in all your gold. And people actually turned in their gold. That's the crazy part about it. Let me keep reading. All expenses of any of the conservatorships shall be paid out of the assets of such banks and shall be a lien thereon, which shall be prior to any other liens provided by this act or otherwise. The conservator shall receive as a salary an amount not greater than paid to the employees of the federal government for similar services. Section 204, the comptroller of the currency shall cause by made such examination of the affairs of such banks as shall be necessary to inform him as to the financial condition of such bank, and the examiner shall make a report thereon to the comptroller of the currency at the earliest practicable date. Section 205. If the comptroller of the currency becomes satisfied that it may safely be done and it would be in the public's best interest, he may, in his discretion, terminate the conservatorship and permit such bank to resume the transaction of its business subject to such terms, conditions, restrictions, and limitations as he may prescribe. Section 206. While such bank is in the hands of a conservator appointed by the comptroller of the currency, the comptroller may require the conservator to set aside and make available for withdrawal by depositors and payment to other creditors on a rateable basis such amounts as in the opinion of the comptroller may safely be used for this purpose. And the comptroller may, in his discretion, permit the conservator to receive deposits, but deposits received while the bank is in the hands of the conservator shall not be subject to any limitations as to the payments or withdrawals, and such deposits shall be segregated and shall not be used to liquidate any indebtedness of such bank existing at the time that the conservator was appointed. Let's look at who the indebtedness to a bank would be. Any guesses? Would that be the Federal Reserve? And, wait for it, that's right, the depositors. The depositors are the ones that are going to get stuck in this deal, and that's who got stuck in the deal. Now, in 1933, people borrowed money because we had the roaring 20s, and people borrowed money, and they bought stocks at the pumping of the stockbrokers. And then when the market crashed, that the insiders crashed, at that point in time is when they came out in this 1933 New Deal. And that's where the SEC got set up, another fraudulent agency. So I think we're going to cover, first of all, the fake news, and then we're going to go after the fake departments that are out here. And there's a plethora of them, and they have a lot of money on their books and in their accounts, and shall not be used for liquidating any indebtedness of such bank existing at the time that the conservator was appointed for it, or any subsequent indebtedness incurred for the purpose of liquidating any indebtedness of such bank existing at the time such conservator was appointed. Such deposits received while the bank is in the hands of the conservators shall be kept on hand in cash, invested in the direct obligations of the United States. Now, here's a question. What is the direct obligations of the United States? Would it be you? but that's after the fight, invested in the direct obligations of the United States or deposited with the Federal Reserve Bank. The Federal Reserve banks are hereby authorized to open and maintain separate deposit accounts for such purposes, or for the purpose of receiving deposits from state officials in charge of state banks under similar circumstances. Section 7. In any reorganization of any national banking association under a plan of a kind which, under existing law, requires the consent, as the case may be, A, of depositors or other creditors. A, let me read it again. A, of depositors and other creditors. B, of stockholders, or C, of both depositors and other creditors and stockholders. Such reorganization shall become effective only, 1, when a comptroller of the currency shall be satisfied that the plan of reorganization is fair and equitable to all depositors, other creditors, and stockholders, and is in the public's interest, and shall have approved the plan subject to such conditions, restrictions, and limitations as he may prescribe. And 2, when after reasonable notice of such reorganization, as the case may require, A, depositors and other creditors of such banks representing at least 75% in amount of its total deposits and other liabilities as shown by the books of the National Banking Association, or B, stockholders owning at least 2/3 of its outstanding capital stock as shown by the books of the National Banking Association, or C, both depositors and other creditors representing at least 75% in amount of the total deposits and other liabilities, and stockholders owning at least 2/3 of its outstanding capital stock as shown by the books of the National Banking Association shall have consent in writing the plan of reorganization. Okay, let me skip down a little bit further. Let me read section 210. Nothing in this title shall be construed to impair in any manner any powers of the President, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Comptroller of the Currency, or the Federal Reserve Board. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've been led to believe that the Federal Reserve Bank is owned by our government, and that's simply not true. The Federal Reserve Bank is owned by offshore bankers through a trust, and the bankers in 1913, December 23rd, had hoodwinked some guys there in Congress that were still there, that were in the Washington, D.C. area, to pass this bill. So my point is this: Congress created the ability for the offshore bankers, the deep state, to do what they wanted to do to the American people. Congress can take it away. And that's why in 2018, we as a people need to send a message to Congress. You're fired. How about that message? Pretty simple. And anybody that's been in public office for longer than, let's say, 2 terms, in any type of public office, I'm talking about dog catcher all the way up. In other words, the career politicians, they need to go. They need to get someplace, move around, kick rocks, go the next step. And they need to be out of Washington. And it's only going to be the people taking their rightful position and holding people in administration accountable for what's going on. So, Section 210, nothing in this bill shall be construed to impair in any manner any powers of the President, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Comptroller of the Currency, or the Federal Reserve Board. We need to abolish the Federal Reserve. We need to abolish the I.R.S. Now, some people say, well, we don't own the I.R.S. The I.R.S. is an offshore, separate entity from the government. Well, fine. Then if that's the case, we, the American people, need to cut that off. And America needs to own their money. The people need to own their money. That's why this cryptocurrency move has been so strong. And it's only going to get a lot stronger, because as Washington begins to fight the cryptocurrency debate, you can do one of 2 things. You can force it underground. You can try to regulate it and control it and all the other stuff. You can try to capture it. That's not going to go real well. And I really believe what you're going to see in America, and this is coming up, you're going to see the Nuremberg trials happen. You're going to see the deep state get arrested. You're going to see a lot of indictments coming out. You're also going to see the dollar, whatever that dollar ultimately is going to be, get very strong. And in the article that I started the program off with the CNBC article, there was another article. I just saw the comment of this, and let me flip back over to it real quick, see if I can find it. Okay, here it is. It's a sponsored link right next to the article, first page. Reclusive millionaire warns, get out of cash now. And let me publicly say this, January 18th, 1 year minus a day from the time that Trump took office, that particular article, I don't know who the reclusive millionaire is, and I'm not even going to read it, but I can tell you this, cash is going to be the place to be. And the US dollar, whatever that ultimately ends up, is going to be the strongest thing on the planet. You're going to see some really great things happen in 2018. And how that comes about, I can't tell you the mechanics because I've been trying to figure this out, but I'm just telling you that this Federal Reserve system, this Babylonian type system that's all built on smoke and mirrors and debt, that's all it's built on. That's going to have some issues. That's going to have some real issues coming up. And again, for me to tell you exactly how this is going to play out or when it's going to play out, I would not want to speculate on that. But what I will tell you is that the war on cash and on the dollar that's been happening, and the dollar has just been eviscerated. There's several things that could happen. Trump could step left and just let the dollar crash and implode. And then America step back out with its own either cryptocurrency or its own American dollar again, that the people actually own their currency. Because right now, you don't even own your currency. You don't own your car. You don't own your house. And you people that think that, well, hey, I had my house paid off. Well, that's great. Now, try not to pay the tax on that home. The organization that you've registered your home with, that you've given your home to, that department, whether it's the city or the county, they're going to come take your house and you have nothing because you registered your home. You know, Texas is the only state, that's not true. I believe that there's 2 states that have allodial title. And a lot of you don't even know what that means, and I'm not going to explain it to you. I want for you to go do the research on this. It's important that you get in the game. Now, you may be traveling and not able to do the research right now, but you need to do the research about allodial title and what it means to you. You also need to do the research about the jurisdiction of the United States. Where is the United States? What is the United States? When they refer to the United States in a geographical sense, why would they say that? See, here's the thing about the Luciferians. It's very important for them to be technically correct, but their whole facade is about deception. So when they say the United States of America compared to the United States or the U.S., do you think they're saying that because they're lazy? No, there's a reason that they're writing it that way. But the American people, it goes right over their heads and they don't understand what's being communicated. So again, on the Joseph Farley Show, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to get into the proof, to the facts of what money is, where it comes from, where it's going, and how you can protect yourself in the upcoming days. Okay, let me read this part in Title 4. Section 401. The 6th paragraph of Section 18 of the Federal Reserve Act is amended to read as follows. Upon the deposit with the Treasury of the United States, A, of any direct obligation of the United States, or B, any notes, drafts, bills of exchange, or banker's acceptance acquired under the provision of this act, any Federal Reserve Bank making such deposit in the manner prescribed by the Secretary of the Treasury shall be entitled to receive from the Comptroller of the Currency circulating notes in blank. Now that's BLANK. In blank. Duly registered and countersigned. When such circulating notes are issued against the security of obligations of the United States, the amount of such circulating notes shall be equal to the face value of the direct obligation of the United States, so deposited as security, and when issued against the security of a notes, drafts, bills of exchange, and bankers' acceptance acquired under the provisions of this act, the amount thereof shall be equal to not more than 90% of the estimated value of such note, drafts, bills of exchange, and bankers' acceptance so deposited as security. 90%. Why a haircut? They refer to anything below par to be a haircut. So there's 10% that's discounted. Such notes shall be the obligation of the Federal Reserve Bank procuring the same, shall be in the form prescribed by the Secretary of the Treasury, shall be receivable at par in part of the United States for the same purpose as our national banknotes, and shall be redeemable in lawful money of the United States on presentment at the United States Treasury. Yeah, try that today. Or at a bank of issue. Now, these were banknotes. Let's keep going. The Secretary of the Treasury is authorized and empowered to prescribe regulations governing the issuance, redemption, replacement, retirement, and destruction of such circulating notes and the release and substitute of security thereof. Such circulating notes shall be subject to the same tax as is provided by law for circulating notes of national banks secured by 2% bonds of the United States. Such circulating notes shall be issued under paragraph after the President has declared by proclamation that the emergency recognized by the President by proclamation of March 6, 1933, has terminated, unless such circulating notes are secured by deposits of bonds of the United States bearing the circulating privilege, when required to do so by the Secretary of the Treasury. Federal Reserve agents shall act as agent of the Treasury of the United States or of the Comptroller of the Currency, or both, for the performance of any of functions which the Treasury of the Comptroller may be called upon to perform in carrying out the provisions of this paragraph. And appropriations available for distinctive paper in printing United States currency or national bank currencies are hereby made available for the production of circulating notes of the Federal Reserve banks, herein provided. But the United States shall be reimbursed by the Federal Reserve Bank because stop right here in the reading, because the Federal Reserve Bank is the one that owns the note, not you. Start reading. Federal Reserve Bank, to which such notes are issued for all expenses necessary incurred in connection with the procuring of such notes and all other expenses incidental to their issuance, redemption, replacement, retirement, and destruction. Section 402, 10B of the Federal Reserve Act as amended is further amended to read as follows. Section 10B. Okay, here's where the advancement of credit comes in. In exceptional and extingent circumstances, and when any member bank has no further eligible and acceptable assets available to enable it to obtain adequate credit accommodations through the rediscounting at the Federal Reserve Bank or any other method provided by this act other than that provided in Section 10A, any Federal Reserve Bank under rules and regulations prescribed by the Federal Reserve Board may make advances So, ladies and gentlemen, you're not being loaned money. You're being loaned credit. That's all they're sending you. And on any loan default, you can ask them, where's the money? Well, I'm sorry, we haven't loaned you money. We loaned you credit off your signature. That's the real collateral. The signature is the collateral. What they've done is they've taken your signature, they've gone to your corporate all caps name account that's being traded under your social security number. They've gone into that account and they've extracted the credits that are in there. They haven't loaned you anything. Here's what they've done. They've taken your credit and now your asset as collateral. And so over the time periods when they manipulate the market, either A, crash it, create a 9/11 event, create a 2008 event, create a 1929 event, that's where they scoop up all the assets. Now, I will promise you that our president does not have a full understanding of how this thing works. There's no way. Few people on the planet really understand how this thing works, how the Federal Reserve banking system really works. But our president has the power and the ability to change it. And that's why they are trying to declare him mentally incompetent. That's why they're trying to declare him mentally incompetent. That's why they're trying to start the false flags. That's why they're trying to create all the fake news around the president. Don't think for a moment that this is about his personality, because it has nothing to do with our president's personality. It has everything to do with the power that that office holds, because he is not a swamp monster. He is not one of the insiders into Washington. He is a absolute wrecking ball, and the deep state hates it. Well, let me say this. There's a bunch of patriots out there that work in these different agencies. And it's real important to understand that you can't blame the people that are in these agencies. If you do, you need to start with yourself first. It's we, the people, that have allowed this to go on. But you may say, hey, I didn't know. Well, you're right. You didn't know. I didn't know. There's a lot of us, we didn't know. But here's the issue. Now you know, what are you going to do with it? That's the real issue. Once you know how this thing works, now you have an obligation. And you have a choice to make. Either you can go back to your Facebook, to the things that entertain you, back to the fake football game. Look, all the professional sports are phony, fake. Now, do they actually play sports? Yes, they do. Do guys get hurt? But for the most part, it's to keep you distracted. That's the goal of the globalists. No difference between today and the days of the Babylonians. They did the same thing. Let's get the lions. Let's get the Christians. Let's feed the Christians to the lions. We'll drag the people out here for a big show, an all-day event with drunkenness, debauchery, the whole thing. It's what it's all about. It's to distract you while they're stealing you blind. That's the real purpose of it. It's just like these free apps that you download on your phone. The reason they're giving it to you free is because they're taking your data and selling it. Sorry to say, but that's the truth. All right, back to the document here. And we're right in the middle of Section 10B. And it says, prescribed by the Federal Reserve Board, may make advances to such member banks on its time and demand notes secured to the satisfaction of the Federal Reserve Bank. Each such note shall bear interest at a rate not less than 1% per annum, higher than the highest discount rate in effect at the Federal Reserve Bank on the day of such note. No advance shall be made under this section after March 3rd, 1934, or after the expiration of such additional period, not exceeding 1 year, as the president may prescribe. Okay, here's the thing. The following year, they just renew it. They just have amendments. That's all they do. Section 403. Section 13 of the Federal Reserve Act as amended is amended by adding at the end thereof the following new paragraph. Subject to such limitations, restrictions, and regulations as the Federal Reserve Board may prescribe, any Federal Reserve Bank may make advancements to any You ready for this? Individual, partnership, or corporation secured by direct obligation of the United States. Last sentence. Such advances shall be made for a period not exceeding 90 days and shall bear interest at rates fixed from time to time by the Federal Reserve Bank, subject to the review determination of the Federal Reserve Board. Now, guys, there is a tremendous amount of information in this document, and you can get this document online. You can also download it in the show notes. We'll have it there as well for you. You'll start to get an understanding of how this works and why this is so important, because it has everything to do with the cryptocurrency. It has everything to do with the agency. It has everything to do with your future, your financial future. And the point comes up, why do you go to work? Well, money, you need to understand, is a tool. This thing that we call money, this United States note, this Federal Reserve note, it's a tool. And you need to use it as a tool. And when the market crashes, not if, when, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to jump. You know, in 1929, there were a lot of people that jumped out of windows. There's a lot of people that have lost their lives over something that's not even real. It's a complete fantasy. There's another document that, again, the next article of importance is Money and Banking, a Constitutional Perspective, written by Walker F. Todd. Now, Walker F. Todd is a former legal counsel at the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. In 2014, he was the grantee at the Institute for New Economic Thinking. The importance of this particular article is to give you an idea about money, to give you directions. Now, there's a lot of things in this article that I don't necessarily agree with, positions made from one particular side. And the point of this article that I would like for you to come away with once you read it is that America should not have a central bank that is offshore and owned by foreign entities and offshore bankers that are trying to control America. Here's what you're going to see coming up in America. Right now, OPEC controls our economy. That's going to change in a big way. Right now, the Federal Reserve, that's not federal, and it has no reserves, controls our monetary policy. Those two items, you're going to see change. May not happen in 2018, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen very quickly. So these are short nuggets that I want to leave with you. Thank you for joining us on the Joseph Farley Show, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. God bless. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Please sign up for the notes and for future show information on our website, josephfarleyshow.com. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and help share the links. We're in a fight for the very heart of America. We're being blocked by the globalists, the social media ghettos, and the fake news media, because here is where truth is revealed.